Welcome to Off Code, the show where we ignore the cultural codes and have real and intriguing conversations regarding the Black community and ways we can move forward to human flourishing. Hello and welcome to another episode of Off Code. I am Kevin Briggins.
And I am Monique Dusan. Kevin, look at you opening the show, doing it good.
And look at all these things you let me do now.
Stop. It ain't about me letting you do that. You better stop playing. Oh my gosh, how are you?
I'm good. How you been?
Been well. You know, I am looking forward to today's show. Our guest is Toni McFadden, and I met Toni at an event we were both at in Phoenix back at the end of 22. And she just has such an awesome story. I can't wait for her to share her story with you and with all of you watching. And then to get into the topic of abortion. I know we've covered abortion lightly on our show before, but I think bringing Toni on is going to just be such a rich experience and a rich conversation. Yeah. So let's go on and bring Toni on.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, I want to start. You and Kevin have never met, but we've met. And so if you could just start by telling us just a little bit about yourself. Who are you?
Yes, my name is Toni McFadden, and I am, number one, I'm a child of God. Number two, I'm a wife. I have 4 children, and God has called me to speak out on the topic of abortion. And this is something that's very close to my heart because I have had an abortion myself, which God has given me this platform to be able to speak on a very difficult topic, but in a way that's compassionate, but also displaying the truth. And so I have been privileged to be able to speak in various venues. One of my favorites was the National March for Life in Washington, D.C., the year that Roe v. Wade was overturned. Wow. And so I'm just very thankful that God has taken probably the biggest regret of my life and has turned it around for his glory. And I think that I will be speaking about this topic to the day that I die, because this is something, a lot of the things that I say is something that I wish someone would have told me when I was facing my own unplanned pregnancy.
Wow. You know, one of the things that I've really appreciated in our conversation, like when we met and then we had a follow-up conversation, your story is just so unique, like from beginning to end. And it's a beautiful story amidst the tragedy of abortion. And it's just it's a connection that I don't think many people will ever hear about. Can you help us understand like why and how the conversation and topic of abortion became such an important issue in your own life?
I didn't know it was going to become such an important issue for me. So if I take you back, I did not think I would ever be in a place where I would have to make a decision to have an abortion in the first place. I was a senior in high school, and I had been dating a guy off and on for about 2 years, and he had gone off to college, and I had a year left of high school, and lo and behold, we get pregnant. And of course, I am feeling all the things that I believe a teenage girl would face. You're scared. You don't want to tell your parents. You're thinking about your future. And at the same time, you don't want anyone to know. At that time, I told my best friend, and the first thing she said to me was, "You can't keep this baby." And when I told my boyfriend, the first thing he said was, well, it was kind of formed into a question. He said, "You don't want to keep it, do you?" So those were the only 2 voices that I heard. And I always encourage those when I'm speaking at a church or I speak at an event, how powerful it is when you have the truth and you're able to speak into someone's life who does not have hope. because when I heard that I was pregnant and found out I was pregnant, I couldn't see beyond that. I could not see hope. All I could see was that my life was over, that I wasn't going to be able to do the things that I had planned on doing. And I was also fearful of my relationship. So long story short, I end up calling a Planned Parenthood. And this is how deceptive they were. Now, I'm aging myself a little bit. I did not have a cell phone at this time. There were no cell phones. We had beepers at this time. So they had to call your house.
Hey, hold it down for the beeper. Hold it down for the beeper. Right? Yes. Right? You know, you put the little codes in, turn it upside down, have the numbers.
Exactly. Yes. Text. That was our way of texting.
Yes.
So they had to call your house in order to remind you of your appointment. And what they told me was, I'm going to give you a new name so that when we call your house, in case you don't answer and one of your parents answer, you'll know that this is us calling. Now, at the time, as a teenager, I'm thinking they're helping me. But when I look back now, I'm like, that is so deceptive, because the last thing they want is for parents to be involved in your decision, which that's actually what I needed in that moment. But I kept it a secret from my parents and ended up driving about close to an hour away to this abortion clinic. And my boyfriend came and my best friend came. And I knew nothing about fetal development. I was so uneducated. And I remember my name being called, and I remember hating being in that place, but feeling like I had no other option. So I go, they call my name, and they decide to give me an ultrasound. And what I noticed was the screen was facing the wall. And I asked the nurse if I could see the screen, and she was visibly agitated because I asked that simple question. Because the last thing they want is for you to see your baby. I later learned that the only reason they gave me the ultrasound was to see how far along I was, so they knew how much to charge me for the abortion.
Wow.
So I was about 7 weeks along, and I remember the nurse not even allowing me to ask any more questions when she did eventually turn the screen around. She just said, "See, it's nothing. It's just the size of a pea." Now, we know, because of technology now, that at 7 weeks, my baby already had a heartbeat. We know that at the moment of conception, that child already had its own unique DNA that will never, ever be created again. That is the blueprint for their entire life. And that's how tall they're going to be. It's their eye color, their skin tone, all of that. And in that moment, as a scared teenager, those words to me gave me temporary relief. Because in my mind, I just thought, okay, I'm not killing a baby. And even though it was a lie, it made me feel better in the moment to hear those lies to me. I went in to see the abortionist, and I was given what's called the RU46 pill, the abortion pills, which they are now distributing right over the counter. You can get at CVS, Walgreens, where I had to go through getting an ultrasound, going to the abortion clinic before I could get those pills. And now this is so detrimental that girls are able to just get these pills even online, which it shows how much they truly do not care about women. So I was given these pills, and then I was given a second set to take home with me to expel the pregnancy. And you can read more about the detail of this in my book, but I did have complications from taking these pills. Long story short, I actually started hemorrhaging almost a month and a half after taking the pills. And this happened while I was in school. And I started getting these excruciating pains throughout my entire body. And not to be graphic, just to be graphic, but there were blood clots the size of my fist leaving my body for hours. And this started at school to eventually my mom coming and picking me up. I did not tell my mom about it. I just went home, and I just remember going from my bed to the bathroom for hours. And I tell people, this is what the abortion industry says empowers. And there's nothing empowering about taking the life of your own, because that changed me that day. Because God did not give women wombs in order to destroy life. We have the ability and the gift to give life. And in that scenario, in that traumatic event, even though it was legal to do that, I stuffed that down and tried to pretend for years that that didn't happen. My favorite 2 words, but God. But God saw fit to rescue me about 3 years after that. And still, when I gave my life to the Lord, I did not know that he was going to use my voice to call out the darkness of abortion and shine light on it through my own story. I had no clue the extent of how he was going to use my story, but he told me very early on through the book of Isaiah, I believe it's chapter 1, when he says, though your sins are like scarlet, they shall be white as snow. And so he was showing me through those verses that, no, I can't just pretend that didn't happen. I needed to repent. I needed to see in reality what I had done before I could really experience the forgiveness and the grace that God had given me. Because every time I share my story, I am experiencing over and over again the grace of God, because I know I don't deserve it. And I knew it took his death and his resurrection to set me free. I knew that every time I share my story, that the reality of Revelation 12:11 that says they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony, that my testimony is not just mine, it's to set other people free. And so I was willing to be vulnerable with the darkest place of my life in order that other women wouldn't have to go through the same thing that I did. And also to let women that have gone through it know that they can be set free, that healing is available for them. And so I was willing to be vulnerable with that. And that came in an unexpected way as well. God surprises you in every way, and he does go above and beyond what we expect. And I started out by working in a pregnancy resource center. Go figure. So
how did you get to a pregnancy resource center from, like, I feel like I'm missing something. Like, you know what I mean? Because I hear the abortion, and then I hear salvation. Pregnancy resource center? Like, was it just, did it feel for you like the natural next step, or like, was there someone encouraging you to go into that?
Yeah. So after I was about to graduate college, I was one of those people like, I don't know what I'm going to do after I graduate. And I was a vocal performance major, and then I minored in communications. And I was sharing a lot on my college campus, but I wasn't necessarily talking about my abortion. I was more talking about the mistakes of not saving sex for marriage, how I viewed relationships differently now because I was a believer, all of that. So because our God is so detailed, he brought this girl in my life that we went to the same church. And she would speak in schools, in middle schools and high schools, on saving sex for marriage. And someone had shared with her about my story. And so we linked up, and she was just sharing with me what she did. And she said, I think you would love this. I think this would be a great fit for you. And as she's speaking, she says, I work for a pregnancy resource center. And my heart just starts to beat out of my chest. And I remember that this was going to be the first time that I had ever shared my abortion story with someone else. And I felt the Holy Spirit telling me to share that with her in that moment. And I don't even know how it came out. It just came out. And I remember her saying to me, do you know how many girls need to hear your story? So that's how I got linked up with the Pregnancy Resource Center. And when I was going through my unplanned pregnancy, I didn't even know what pregnancy resources were. I had no education about that. So I watched her in the classroom speak, and I just knew this is where God has called me. This is what I'm supposed to do. And I was giving these kids a picture of what it looked like to not save sex for marriage, but now I was on the side of saving sex for marriage. So I was giving them both pictures, which was very powerful for them to hear, because it wasn't just speakers in front of them who had all waited for marriage and kind of lived this perfect, life. They were able to see different sides with all of our stories. So that's how I got into the pregnancy resource part. And through that, I actually became the director of that program. And so we were in about 30, 35 schools. We were in mainline schools. We were in city schools. It was an amazing, amazing season to be able to speak into these kids' lives and really give them a picture of what society was not giving them, and raising that standard of sexuality, and that they're worth more than what the culture was telling them. And not only that, I was living that out myself because I wasn't married. So it wasn't like I was saying, this is an option, you do this because you're children. I'm in my 20s, not married, watching a lot of my friends get married, and they're saying, wait, you're going to wait now when you've already experienced. And I'm like, yes, because I have a new standard now. And when you have high standards, you'll meet people who have high standards too. And so I'm willing to wait for that. So as I said, I'm watching a lot of my friends get married at this point, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, still not married, I'm like, okay, God, you can bring my husband now. He's like, nope. So, I had to wait for a while. But little do I know that God was not done. I had gone through post-abortion counseling, which I recommend any woman who has had an abortion or even multiple abortions to go through post-abortion counseling, because that's very important. Because I think they do know, some are in denial, but some don't realize how it's affecting them. And a lot of women who write me after they've heard me share my story, they still can't comprehend Jesus forgiving them for that sin. And that's probably one of the main things that a lot of women will write me. Like, it's been 20 years, 15 years. And, will God still forgive me for this? When it's really, they don't know how to forgive themselves for it. And I often tell them his blood is enough. It is enough to cover your sin, your transgressions. When he says he casts it to the depth of the sea, he means it. He goes by his word. You don't have to second guess God's word. He means what he says. And so I believe that, as I was walking obedience to this and trusting God, I came to a point where I was okay if I didn't get married. Like, I honestly was so amazed at all that God had done for me. I got to speak in Israel. I got to speak in Africa. I did so many things that in my singleness that I did not ever think was possible, that I was okay if that wasn't what God had for me.
As a guy, we always hear abortion is all about a woman's choice, right? Mm-hmm. But we know that oftentimes it is the man or the boyfriend in the relationship that plays a major role in the abortion. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about the role that men play or typically play in the role of women having abortions or being pressured to have abortions?
Yeah. See, most women statistically would keep their baby if they had the support of the boyfriend. They would keep the baby. But a lot of times, like in my case, and I don't even think I mentioned this, my boyfriend actually broke up with me the day after he brought me to the abortion clinic.
Wow.
And, to some extent you get it because they're young. They're not thinking about wanting to be a father. But then on the other hand, say he wanted to keep the baby and I didn't. I have more of a right than he does, which I don't think is right either. And I know of guys who have wanted to keep their baby and the woman not wanting to, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
I think that there's such a breakdown with family. There's such a breakdown with how our culture views sex that this is just the implication of what's happening now, that the innocent is being slaughtered because we're not doing things in the right order. God's order, obviously. And and that's why, our society has such a high rate of fatherlessness. And when I counsel women now, most of the time, the women who are keeping their babies is because they have the support that they need. And the men are stepping up and doing what they're supposed to do, even if they don't stay together, just because they have the support there. Men do not understand how powerful it would be if they just stood up for the vulnerable, because that's what they're called to do. They're called to lead, they're called to protect. And when they're not doing that, it's detrimental to the vulnerable. First the babies and then the woman as well. So I experienced that. Just him asking me that question, like I said, he was just like, you don't want to keep it, do you? Yeah. Was insinuating, I don't want this baby. I hope you don't think you're going to keep this baby. That's what he was kind of pushing and manipulating me in the way that he asked me. And then his true colors came out, obviously, after I went through with the abortion and he knew I had taken the pills. Then he just stopped calling me and stopped talking to me.
Wow.
So not only did I have to deal with the repercussion of going through this by myself, but then the heartbreak of him leaving when I thought that was the very thing that was going to keep him. And it did the very opposite. Yeah. So thank you for that question, because I think that is really important for men to hear.
Yeah, no, that's good.
I wanted to say, for everybody watching, so often we as women will have this conversation in our own little secret quarters and chambers as just women. And Kevin, your voice is so important in this conversation representing men, because oftentimes there are men in the background who, either wish that they would have, had the moral courage to say no, don't get an abortion, or they're dealing with their own grief because, their girlfriend, ex-girlfriend, whatever, had an abortion without their consent, or because they themselves may have encouraged an abortion. And so I think that, our culture right now says, well, my body, my choice, and that completely excludes men. And, or, there's this cultural narrative that just says men don't get a vote. Like, you don't have a uterus, so you don't get to have a say. And that's not true. And especially for us as believers, we understand the role of family. We understand the role of men within the family and within the broader culture overall. And we understand that the man's voice is very important. So come on, Kevin, we see you. We know you here.
Hey, it's such an important conversation. It really is. And I know the voice of men gets left out. I have a close friend who, when he was a teenager, got a girl pregnant. He wanted to keep the baby. She didn't. She decided to have the abortion. He had nothing. There was nothing he can do about it. And he struggled for a long time knowing that he should have a kid, right? And wondering what that child would look like. What would they, they would be this old now. And like, those are real things that even men go through. And it's just something that we've completely disregarded. I saw something recently that says that if a man doesn't take care of his kid and he's a deadbeat dad, but if a woman wants to have an abortion, she's brave. It's like,
Yeah.
Like we shame one as deadbeat, and then we praise the other. It's the same neglect. It's the same just things that we shouldn't be honoring, right? In our society and in our culture. So
there's just a disregard of the contribution that men make. And yes, while our podcast is geared toward Blacks, this is something that I see across the board, regardless of ethnicity or skin color. You know, there's this huge disregard of the contribution of men, and we need men.
Unshaken 2024 is coming. Join 3 of the most influential voices in cultural apologetics, Natasha Crane, Frank Turek, and Elisa Childers, as they equip Christians to live for Jesus in a world increasingly at odds with biblical Christianity. At Unshaken, you will join hundreds of others who are seeking to navigate the intersection of societal pressure and biblical truth, covering topics such as deconstruction, social justice, sexuality, and many more. Unshaken will teach you what the Bible has already said about the social issues we face today, and equip you to stand firm in God's truth. The Unshaken Conference will be visiting Buffalo, New York, and Austin, Texas in fall 2024. For details and tickets, visit unshakenconference.com and use code FRIEND20 to get 20% off your ticket price. Join us this year for an experience that will embolden and encourage your faith. That's code FRIEND20 at unshakenconference.com. See you there.
Toni, I know we got off track just a little bit because you were going and telling us that the Lord, I think you were going to say, brought someone around a couple of years later.
He was waiting 2 years. That's what I heard.
Oh, he was in the background. Okay, look at God.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So go ahead, keep going.
Well, I have no clue about this, but eventually this person reached out to me and said, there's some things that I need to share with you, and I don't want to share it over the phone or anything. I would want to meet you in person to speak with you. And I hadn't seen this person in almost 10 years. And the person I'm talking about is my ex-boyfriend, who I had the abortion with. I remember sitting across from him. I hadn't seen each other, like I said, in almost 10 years. And this is what I mean by God goes above and beyond what we expect. He sat across from me and said that the reason he left that relationship was because he didn't want to have to face the fact that we ended the life of our child. And he said it was easier for me to act like a little boy and just run away from the situation. Now, like I said, God had already done so much in my life. And through going through post-abortion counseling, I had a ceremony for my baby. I had forgiven the people that I felt hurt me. And obviously he was one of them. But you know, when someone's sitting right in front of you, it causes you to really question your heart on if you truly forgave them when they're sitting right across from you. Mm-hmm. But just hearing his words, I was just in awe, first and foremost, of God, that he did not have to do this. You know, a lot of women don't get to hear someone come back and say, will you forgive me for this? And it was hard to take in everything, because obviously I had my guard up too, because the last time I had talked to him was when I was at the abortion clinic. So, you know, to see his face, to hear these words, it was like looking at a completely different person. And I had no idea that God had captured his heart a few years beforehand. And I was one of the people that God told him to go back and apologize to. And so he wanted to be obedient to that. And, you know, less than a year later, he was the one I married.
Won't he do it? Won't he
will. Won't he will.
Yes.
I had to have Krista put all of us on camera because I needed to see Kevin's face on that one. Won't he do it?
Wow, man.
Yep.
Praise the Lord.
We just celebrated 15 years of marriage.
Congratulations. That is
Thank you.
awesome, man. You got 4 kids.
We have 4 kids, well, 5. One is in heaven.
Right.
But, you know, one of the greatest memories I have is on our wedding day, we were able to light an extra candle to represent our baby. And we wrote our story for our guests. And my friend made me a little shadow box that had a willow tree doll that was holding a balloon that said hope. And it had my memorial service I had done for the baby when I was going through post-abortion counseling was in the shadow box. So that was on the altar as well. So when we did the unity candle, we also lit a candle to represent our child's life, because we believe every time we share our story that our child is no longer a statistic, but it is giving a voice to babies and to save babies, and that their life is not in vain. And so the Lord keeps redeeming all the time. He just does not stop redeeming. Even looking at our 4 alive children, we can see the legacy now being changed just because God rescued both of our hearts separately. You know, he was the last person I thought I was going to marry. He was not on my radar at all. But God, you know, God knows how to write a good love story. And I tell my single friends, just wait on him, because he knows how to pick a husband for you.
Wow.
He knows how to. So I'm so thankful and so grateful for what God has done, what he continues to do, and being able to speak with my husband sometimes has been a blessing. And my husband's story is really powerful too, from where coming out of addiction and now leading the addiction place now. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. So does he do any kind of speaking on this type of stuff to talk about the men's side of things?
He does not on the abortion side. He's more, because his story was, he was in addiction, in and out of jail, drugs, all of that's more his wheelhouse. He knows how to speak on that. It takes a lot for him. He's like, that's your thing. You're better at speaking at that. But he has before, when God gives him the words in the moment that he needs. But he just knows how it impacts men just as much as it impacts women. Yeah. And if he could go back, we both say this, we would give our child life in a heartbeat.
Man, when I hear your story, I just want like the Hammond organ. I feel like a fan. My shoulders just want to go. I just want to take off and run. Because girl, that's good. That is good stuff. Yeah, I feel like that's where the shouting music need to come on. My goodness.
Amazing.
Here's a question. You know, this podcast talks largely to those in the Black community. Mm-hmm. And within the Black community, I feel like, and I'm just saying this is a feeling. I'm not saying that there's a data behind this, but from my experience, the topic of abortion is a hard topic to broach in the Black community.
Oh, yes.
Why do you think that okay, so I'm assuming that you think that as well. Mm-hmm. If you do think that, why do you think it's such a hard topic to talk about?
There is a disconnect. I don't know what it is. I have spoken on Black campuses before. Rarely, though. Those are the hardest ones to get into. I partnered with Students for Life of America. I spoke on the topic of Black genocide. Emory, I spoke at. They tried to get me booted off, and it was a virtual event. And Black feminists got together and wrote this whole article about me with so many lies, had never talked to me before in their lives. I just think there's a spiritual disconnect, because anytime you bring up this topic, they do not think it's racist. Everything else is racist except for abortion. Even though I have the statistics, even when you bring up the history of Margaret Sanger and Planned Parenthood, they justify it.
Do you think that people see it as being a white issue? Like, is abortion the issue that white people want to put on Black people? Or, yeah, I'm trying to understand.
It's split. Some of them are like, no, they put Black people in a box. But what about poverty? They can't, there's too many children. They use like the victim mentality on it. But then there's the other side of the white community that's afraid to talk about the Black genocide that is happening because they don't want to be looked at as, oh, you're racist for saying that, or you're trying to be the white savior. When it's me who has Black skin telling them the number one killer in the Black community is not police brutality, it's not guns, it's not drugs, it's not cancer. The number one killer in the Black community that is wiping us out is abortion. Yeah. And that is strategic, that Planned Parenthood, almost over 80% of their surgical abortion facilities are in our neighborhoods on purpose, within walking distance. There are some, when I would speak in the Philly schools, there'd be a Planned Parenthood right across the street from the high school. When I've gone to HBCUs, they don't want me to come and speak there because they partner with Planned Parenthood. You're sleeping with the enemy, the very ones who are trying to take us out, you're locking arms with, pretending like they care about you. I mean, this has been since the inception of Planned Parenthood. Margaret Sanger called it the Negro Project. And she infamously said, we don't want word to get out that we want to eliminate the Negro population. Well, it's happening. I mean, the first huge Planned Parenthood was in New York City. And then after years of that, more Black babies in New York City were being aborted than born alive.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we make up 12% of the population, but yet 36% of abortions are from Black women.
Yeah.
So we're not replacing ourselves.
I've heard the numbers that the Black community today is about half of what it should be.
Mm-hmm.
We've lost half of us since
yeah. Well, because if abortion didn't exist, Blacks would no longer be the minority. If abortion did not exist.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Kevin.
No, I was just going to say the comment because you asked about is this seen as a white issue. I think it's seen as a Republican issue. And
yes,
the Black community is married to the Democrat Party. And since the Democratic Party is pro-abortion, I don't even say pro-choice, they're pro-abortion, then the Black community has to either be pro-abortion itself or has to downplay abortion, right? Mm-hmm. They can't make it a big issue because their conscience then won't let them vote for Democrats. And so they downplay it to kind of justify their hypocrisy. So
yeah,
I agree with that wholeheartedly. I mean, as I said, I've had conversations, debate with Lecrae before online about it because it sounds nice. It sounds like they care. And of course you care that there are women in poverty, but there's white women in poverty too, having babies.
Yeah.
You know, and they will often say, well, the foster care system is messed up. This is messed up. This is it. So the only option is to have an abortion. That's how we're helping the situation. That's not freedom for women to tell them that their only option is to kill their baby. I mean, Planned Parenthood sent out a tweet and it said, if you're Black in America, it's statistically safer to have an abortion than to carry to term or give birth. That was a real tweet.
And that's a complete lie.
Yeah. And they use the excuse of like the mortality rates or that there aren't enough resources and the poverty conversation and all of this. but it just doesn't make sense.
It does
Like
not make sense.
how is my option the better option to kill, to murder?
Right. Because
I go ahead. Sorry.
they completely block that out, that it's killing a baby. Like the rhetoric that they've used for so long, it just, I mean, I can't believe sometimes the debates I get online that they're still using my body, my choice, when you know it is not your body. They still use these old tactics, even though technology clearly shows you these things, and they stick to it. They will not budge on these things. It's very demonic too.
Yeah.
It's a spiritual thing.
Yeah, and then even the way they changed the language, now it's reproductive health care, right? It's so deceptive all the way around.
Right. It can't be healthcare if someone is intentionally being killed in the process. How is that healthcare?
Well, let's talk about that, because for the longest time, I have heard of Planned Parenthood, at least for the last 15 years, I've heard that we should be able to look at Planned Parenthood as being a viable source for women's health care, because they don't just do abortions, but they do like cervical screenings, or I think some of them will even do mammograms and things like that. So that's going to be my question. Like, should we be looking at Planned Parenthood as this viable alternative to women's health care?
No, because they refer out for everything. They do not do mammograms. They don't. They will do the gender medicine and stuff like that. They will do that, but they don't do mammograms. They don't. I mean, you call any of them, and I've done that before. Just call them and ask them, and they refer out to them. Obviously, they have birth control pills and things like that, and they'll have condoms and all those kinds of things. But that's as far as it goes. They would not exist if they couldn't do abortions.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's their moneymaker. That's the way they exist, is abortion.
So then how would you, if Planned Parenthood isn't a viable source of healthcare and we aren't wanting women to have abortions, how would you answer the question of resource? Like, are there sufficient resources or support systems in predominantly Black communities so that women can make alternative choices to abortions? Are things like foster care agencies or adoption agencies in Black communities, or even pregnancy resource centers?
Yeah. I think the problem with Planned Parenthood versus like pregnancy resource centers is our taxpayer dollars are funding a lot of this. So they get so much money from that. Where pregnancy resource centers, they are donor based. But that's what I think a lot of money needs to be poured into. And that's why I think it's important to support our local pregnancy resource centers, because that's where the women are going to get the truth. That's where they're going to get the correct resources. There's optionline.org. If a woman finds herself pregnant, they will link her. All she has to do is put in her zip code, and they will link you to all the pregnancy resource centers near her. Optionline.org. CareNet.
Yep, CareNet.
There are resources, and it's a lot of the stuff is grassroots things. Like for what I do, when a girl comes to me and says, I want to keep my baby, I don't have the support, I throw her a baby shower. Like there are people doing things like that who are praying outside the abortion clinics and giving them resources. And they try to block people from doing that. But there's resources all over the place for them in their communities, but do not stop praying outside those Planned Parenthoods, because when she worked in those places, she said that the attendance rate or the women coming in would drop to 70% when they would pray outside the Planned Parenthoods.
So for for people who don't know, Abby Johnson had her story featured in a movie a couple years ago. Unplanned, yes.
Yes. So I think the resources are there for them. And I just think that people have been so brainwashed to just think if they're in that situation to run to Planned Parenthood. So let me speak about the church then. I think the church needs to have a bigger voice when it comes to this, and to be a place of support as well. That if a girl finds herself in this situation, she doesn't feel like she has to run away from the church, but she runs to the church. And because we need to let her know that, okay, you can't change the situation now, but we're going to lock arms with you and we're going to, help you through this situation and not shame her in this moment. Because again, I've come across a lot of women who've been in those situations too, where they don't feel like they have the freedom to run to the church as well. So I think we need to have a bigger voice there as well, especially in the Black church. I think there's probably a lot of women who've had abortions too. They don't want to talk about it, and it's easier to just stuff it down and be silent. And so I think churches, or I think the issue of abortion has been politicized as well. So the church doesn't want to talk about it either.
Yeah, or they want to talk about it, they just want to be pro-choice. They just want to, bring up their Democratic donors, and the pro-choice rhetoric that comes from Black pulpits is disgusting.
Sad.
Yeah, it's sad.
Sad. It's very sad.
Yeah.
I have loved this conversation. I actually wish we had more time. We are coming short on time, but one of the things that I would love for you to talk about is the psychological implications that you see on women and on men post-abortion. When our culture is pumping the conversation of abortion and your need for an abortion, and silencing men's voices, and then the church, especially the Black church, seems to be in bed with many people who support abortion, and so they're quiet on abortion. Where does that leave people psychologically?
Oh my goodness, it's so detrimental to them because they don't have an outlet to actually process what they just went through. So that's why I said earlier, I've had women who write me want to go through counseling because there's depression, there's a high rate of suicide, there's anger, because when you go through something traumatic, you have to go through what I would call like the grief cycle. And a lot of times we're not giving people the opportunity to grieve because it's a loss. And I think psychologically then, because they don't have an outlet, it's coming out in other ways. It's going to come out in other ways. And that's why when I've gone to these women's marches, you see these women who are so angry and out of their minds. And I think it's because they keep trying to justify what's not natural. There's nothing natural about taking the life of your own flesh and blood.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nothing natural about it. And so when I said earlier too that it changes you, it does. There's just something spiritually that changes you when you go to that depth of choosing yourself over your baby. And I think it happens for the father as well, as I mentioned, because he realizes, I didn't protect you. I didn't protect my own flesh and blood. I didn't protect that most vulnerable person. And that makes them feel shameful, makes them feel like they're not a man. And if they're not dealing with that, that's going to come out in certain ways as well. Depression, all of that. And so this is why I'm counseling probably about 5 or 6 women right now.
Wow.
Who have had abortions in their past, and they see how it's affecting them. And they don't want it to, it's the memories, the flashbacks, the dreams, And it's not even just women who have actually gone through having an abortion. It's the ones who have participated in the clinics too.
Wow.
The things that they've seen, now realizing what they were pushing, that shame that only Jesus can lift.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, Toni, as we wrap up, can you just kind of give some ways in which we, our listeners, can support you or support just this ministry and this movement? What can we do to help in this issue?
I believe every voice matters when it comes to life. That we can no longer sit on the fence about this. And I don't necessarily think you have to be a believer to know that it's wrong to take innocent life.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, I'll say it in two parts. For those who are not a believer, I would say, you know what's right. Use your voice, use your influence, get connected with a PRC, use your gifts to further this cause, because not one person can do this. But as a believer, we cannot sit on the fence about this, because God is the giver of life. Every single human being is created in the image of God. Therefore, you should be pro-life. God is pro-life, and he wants to preserve life, and he wants to use us to be able to do that. And so I think the support goes through not being silent about it. I think it's partnering with your PRC, whatever that looks like. I think that's not being afraid to post about it and having a voice about it, because we let those loud voices take over, and then we get fearful, and then we don't want to share it. It's scary the first couple of times that you step out in it, but once you do, you see the encouragement. You're going to encourage someone else to say, if they can do that, I can do that too. And I think it's more empowering than you think when you are being a voice for the voiceless, and you're stepping out and saying, I'm going to be that person for someone that maybe I needed to hear that as well. And so I will never back down on this. I'm not going to be afraid to share about it, whether it's my story or just giving factual information about it. And I think it's promoting platforms like this and allowing people to have these conversations and being honest and real about them, and allowing people to even share their testimonies like this. I think that says a lot too. So,
well, I want to encourage everyone to read your book. I believe we have a graphic of it that we can put up. Redeemed: My Journey After Abortion. You can get it right there on Amazon. Toni, your story is awesome and amazing. It's such a testament to God's providence in our lives. And so thank you for being with us and for sharing your story and giving additional insight into the abortion world and the horrors that are there, and, empowering us or equipping us on ways that we can actually do something different or be people who are different standing for life. Yeah. Kevin, you want to say anything additional?
No, I'll say, hey, look, next time we're going to hit you on your beeper. You know what I'm saying? I love the back.
It's long gone.
Y'all the beeper. The beep, man. If you had a beeper, but I was poor, so I had a beeper, but we didn't have no phone at home. So I had somebody would beat me, and I'd have to go to the payphone.
Oh my goodness! My kids know nothing about that. They're like, a beeper. They don't even know what a CD is. Listen,
right.
Isn't that a shame?
All right, Toni,
it's a blessing.
Toni, I have to ask you this question. This question. Do you know how to play spades?
No.
Oh my goodness. What is going on? I'm trying to shame both. And you come and you
go fish.
I don't know what it is. Spades. I just feel like spades was the thing that the old men played.
Yeah.
The old men played dominoes. They didn't play.
They did play some bones. Yes, they did.
Yes.
Yeah, but I don't.
Maybe I should learn.
I can't. Girl, ain't nobody gonna teach you how to play spades. If you aren't born with the mental capacity to play spades,
right,
you're just left out.
Yeah, don't start now. Don't start now.
I'm not a big game person anyway.
Okay.
I like phase 10.
Not helping.
Leave me alone.
Oh my goodness. Well,
All right,
Toni, we appreciate it. It was a heavy topic, and I don't know. This is one of my favorite episodes we've done so far.
that was a really good one.
Yeah, it was because it was real. It's real, and it's something that we need to talk more about in our community, and we need to stop downplaying it for the sake of politics.
Yeah,
and accept the fact that you can't say Black Lives Matter if you are pro-choice or pro-abortion. You just can't.
No,
I think the number, like I said, I think the number is 19 million abortions of Black children alone since Roe.
Yeah, I think it might be over that now.
Yeah, I'm sure it's over there now. That number's old.
Yeah,
and then just the fact that the Black community at 40 million, whatever it is right now, should be double what it is. Mm-hmm. We are missing half of us because we've murdered our own children.
Yeah.
Man. So, yeah, I appreciate what you do.
Thank you so much.
Play statistics. Mm-hmm. Toni, thank you so much. And to all of you, thank you so much for watching. We will be back in 2 weeks with another episode of Off Code. We look forward to seeing you then. Bye, everybody.